With me now from Washington is Washington Post reporter Aaron Blake. Aaron, good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
All right, so Donald Trump has called for unity among Republicans and Democrats, but how could a choice like Steve Bannon as his chief strategist derail those efforts?
Well, I don't think it's a ideal pick either for unity within the Republican Party or across the aisle with Democrats. You know, there are two official names that have been put forward here. Reince Priebus probably is a pick that is amenable to both sides. Bannon is somebody that is going to give Republicans some heartburn. The news organization that he ran, Breitbart, has certainly been a thorn in the side of the Republican Party establishment, has certainly been some degree on the political fringes in a lot of ways, in ways that Democrats aren't going to like. We'll see what happens from here on out, but the fact that Donald Trump chose to pick Steve Bannon with one of his first two picks and two very important picks, I think shows that he's not going to necessarily play ball with those who would like him to choose a more moderate path.
And then you've got Secretary of State. It looks like it's between Rudy Giuliani and John Bolton. Giuliani obviously is one of Trump's main surrogates on the campaign trail, and John Bolton certainly has foreign policy experience. But what does Rudy bring to the table?
Well, you know, being mayor of New York normally wouldn't necessarily be a great deal of preparation for becoming Secretary of State. Certainly, of course, Giuliani had plenty of experience with domestic security issues after 9/11 when he was mayor. He's been among Trump's most ardent supporters on the campaign trail. You know, he did run for Senate a while back, eventually ditching that campaign. So it's not necessarily the most obvious pick, you would think, for this particular role, but if anything, Trump's shown us that he's willing to go outside the box on some of these picks. And if there's anybody who's been loyal to him, it's been Rudy Giuliani.
All right. The other interesting note, we've learned that Trump's team might be exploring how 3 of his kids could obtain top security clearances. What kind of a signal does this send as far as how they'll be involved in the White House?
Well, this is just the latest example of them apparently being very involved. Trump's lawyer last week said that his children would be in charge of what he called the blind trust of Trump's empire while he's president. But then on Friday, the children were added to Trump's transition team. They were given roles in deciding who would be in charge in this administration. And now the addition of potentially seeking a top flight security clearance for his children suggests that he sees a pretty major role for them in this campaign. There is a little bit of uncertainty here about exactly why he's seeking that clearance. It could be just so that they can be in certain areas of the White House, but certainly if he's involving them at the highest levels of national security issues, that suggests a very little wall between him and his fortune. It also suggests that the Trump family is going to be very involved in what happens during the Trump administration.
All right, let me ask you about something that you wrote about. So following these anti-Trump protests and arguments surrounding the popular vote, Trump took to Twitter this morning. He said if there were a popular vote election, he still would have won. You actually wrote a piece about this. So how would a popular vote election differ from an electoral college election?
Well, I think it's important to note here that Donald Trump lost the popular vote, and he might lose the popular vote by 2 full points when all is said and done. A lot of votes are still being counted at this point. But if you run a presidential race under the Electoral College, you strategize for the Electoral College. You focus on 10 to 12 individual states. If you run a presidential campaign that is decided by the popular vote, you run a very different campaign in which Donald Trump goes to California, goes to New York State, Hillary Clinton goes to Texas, maybe even a lot of the red areas in the South where she'll want to make sure that turnout among Democrats is as high as possible. It's just a very different campaign, and we can't know how that would have turned out if this was a popular vote campaign from the start. So Donald Trump says he would have won a popular vote election. I'm not certain that's definitely the case. Certainly we would have to run the whole campaign over to find out. But it's a valid question to ask whether or not Trump would have won a popular vote election, because that's not the campaign that we had.
And certainly that would mean that states like Ohio and Florida and Texas would not carry the same kind of weight that they have in past elections. Aaron Blake in Washington, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.